Father, but from the world. So these are the things that we have to be very careful. Now, definitely there's a lot to talk about the lust of the flesh. There are a lot to talk about. And then the lust of the eyes, there are a lot to talk about. And then also the pride of life. These three things that we talk about is called the desire of the world. Now, this is another teaching, but what I want to say is this. Anything, right, we know that it comes from the flesh and comes from ourselves, and we want it for self, let us be very careful. Now, let us be very careful. Anything that we want, that we desire so much for ourselves, that we even forget to look at the things around us, or even spare a thought of what the Lord thinks about. Now, let us be very careful of this. And that is why, right, he says, want us to be very careful of all these things, because all these things comes not from the Father, but from the world. Now, when it comes to desire, right, I want to share all of us about one story. Now, with this story, right, we can better relate what kind, how the desire, right, can make us end up with. Now, I have a friend. He's no longer around. Okay, now what happened was this. Actually, when he was in the prison, right, he has a desire to follow the Lord. Great desire to follow the Lord. He loved the Lord a lot. But then the thing is this. One part of him, right, he desired to follow God, and then he want to give all for God. He can be leading the worship in the prison. But then shortly after, right, when he was with his friends, now he desired to be well known, to be popular among his friends. And that is why, right, he still choose to be with his gang. He will want to talk about gang some more. Now remember, I tell you, it's the either or principle. Now he desire the friend, he desire also to serve God. And then one day, I was still a prisoner then. Then one day I spoke to him. I said, brother, let us not serve two masters. Hey, he said, brother, you preach out of context. This is not what the verse says. Definitely, like, if you want to say this. He said, hey, you preach out of context. Huh? I said, but don't you think that it is true that we shouldn't be like serving two masters? I say, right now, since you have given your heart to Jesus, why not you just follow Jesus and be like me, just renounce? He said, oh no, you do it the wrong way. He said, who says that we cannot have both? When we can still serve the Lord, and then I still reach out to my friend, and who knows that God will use me, reach out to them and bring them to Christ. Wow, very ideal. But you know what is the bottom line? The thing is this, he still desires the things of the world. Because how do I know? Because shortly after, when he was released from prison, we heard that he went back with the friends, because why? They have some business for him. Because why? He had been in and out of prison now. During then, he was only in his 40s, but he has already spent a total number of coming to 20 years in prison. He's in his 40s, but he has already spent half of his life in prison. And that is why he knows that when he's about to release, very hard for him to get a job, very difficult for him to survive. So that's why he wants to mix with his friends so that they can continue to provide for him and even give him something good. Now this was his heart's desire. He do not want to go, he do not want to be like down on earth. This was his desire. And to cut the whole story short, right? Shortly after, he went deeper and deeper. And then from going to church, serving in church, until he stopped serving in church, they have to stop him because he was caught smoking. Now then, after that, right, he stopped serving in church, and then he stopped going to cell group, and then he stopped going to church. But what happened? From someone dealing with handphone, and then after that, right, he was dealing with some pirated things, I think DVD or something like that. Then shortly after, we know that he was dealing with like, got into soccer syndicate, and then after that, right, drug trafficking. Now, this thing become lesser and lesser, but this thing increase and increase and increase, the desire. And shortly after, sentenced to death. He was caught. Drug trafficking. The desire for the things of the world. And that is why it's the either or. We cannot have both. The Bible clearly tells us that if we love the world, the love for the Father or the love of the Father is no longer in us. We cannot say that, no problem, just as long as I have the love of the Father, I still can desire the things of the world, and then I still can reach out to all this. All these are very idealistic plans, and this can be the deception of the devil. Be very careful. It's the either or principle. So what we desire, we have to be very careful. We cannot say that we can have both. No, because it's an either or principle when it comes to this. You choose to have this will be gone. But if you choose to have this will be gone. True enough, I think less than 2 years after his release from prison, he was caught, sentenced to death. He's already hanged. Already hanged. He should be someone serving God, and because God has given him gift, he's quite good in worship. He should be serving the Lord. But because of the desire of the world, he went into smoking, and then shortly after that, he was stopped, and all these things happened. Spiral down. Be very careful with what we desire. We can go spiral down. Now, last but not least, right, we have to guard our belief system. That means what we believe. Guard what we believe. To me, right, this thing is one of the most important. Because our belief, right, will determine how we interpret situation. How we interpret situation will determine how we handle the situation. And how we handle the situation will determine how we journey through the whole situation. And how we journey through the whole situation will determine what we get from that situation. Now, it all depends on our belief. I share all of us again. Now, our belief will determine how we interpret the whole situation, how we perceive, how we look at the whole situation. And how we interpret the whole situation will determine how we are going to handle it. And how we handle it will determine how we are going to journey through. And how we journey through will determine how we get from the whole situation. What we get from the whole situation. Now this is important. Because I remember there was one story in Luke chapter 8, verses 40 to 56, where it talks about one of the synagogue leader called Jairus. Now there was two beliefs in this story. I don't know whether you all realize or not. Now, Jairus believed in Jesus, and that was why even he was a synagogue leader. Actually, right, he was like the chairman of the synagogue, a synagogue leader. He came with a status, he came kneeling down before Jesus. That was the kind of belief he has. He came down kneeling before Jesus, wanting Jesus and knowing that only Jesus can save his daughter who is about to die, a 12-year-old daughter. And there was a woman, 12 years bleeding, coming to Jesus, knowing that touching the hem of Jesus, she could get healing. That kind of belief that she has. But do you know that there's another person who came into the story with another kind of belief? That after Jesus has healed the woman with 12 years of bleeding, there came this servant coming to Jairus saying that do not bother the teacher, because your daughter is dead. Do not bother the teacher. Do not bother Jesus. Another belief. But what I remember was Jairus chose to believe Jesus. And that was why, right, when the servant came, he told Jairus, he says, do not bother or do not trouble the teacher, do not trouble Jesus. Because even if you bring him there, he could do nothing. Why? Your daughter is dead. This was his belief towards Jesus. But look at what Jesus says after that. Jesus says that, do not be afraid, only believe, or just believe. That means you can do many things. But there's only one thing that's needed. One thing that's needed. Only believe. Believe me. What kind of belief was Jesus talking about? Jesus was reminding him, asking him to remember how you came to me. What was your belief initially when you came to me, kneeling before me in front of so many people? What was your belief? You believed that I could save your daughter. Hold on to that belief. That's why Jesus reminded him, don't be afraid, just believe, or only believe. We have to guard what we are believing. We have to be very careful about what we are believing. Do you know what was in that belief? When Jairus held on to that belief, it was the belief that tells the world right now that I cannot, but Jesus can. That kind of belief, I cannot, but Jesus can. Even when everyone laughed at me, because when Jesus went back to the family, Jesus says that, don't worry, she's just asleep. And everyone started laughing at them. When the world thinks that cannot, this belief that we hold on to will tell the world Jesus can. And what is in this belief that Jairus was holding on to? A belief that will change your future. If he believed in what the servant said, he will go into a future without a daughter. But because he believed what Jesus said, he says only believe, and he was reminded how he initially trusted Jesus. And he continued to trust in what Jesus said, and he followed Jesus all the way. And after that, change his future. Right now, he will have a daughter in his future. So that belief, right, will help us to show the world that we cannot, but Jesus can, and it also can change our future. But what we believe is very important. But after having saying all this, right, we need to, the thing that I share all of us is, we need to guard what we choose to remember, okay, what we remember. We need to choose to guard our desire, what we desire, and we need to choose to guard what we believe. Now, what we remember, what we desire, and what we believe. And how can we be constantly on guard? Now, that's the thing. Because we know that we need to guard all these things. All these things will be very important. Why? All these things will lead us to what we are going to say and what we are going to do. So all these things are important. Before we say that let us guard our tongues, our lips, and let us guard our action, all these things, right? We need these three things in our life daily. Now, how do we make sure that these three things will happen? Now, I call that we need to have the flow of God. The flow of God. We call it the flow of God. Okay? We call this the flow of God. We need to have this. Okay, with this I end. We need to have the flow of God. We need to have the fear of God.
Yes.
We need to have the love of God. And this thing is something that I want to emphasize to every one of us. Our obedience of God. Now, why do I say obedience of God? Not only obedient to God, but the obedience of God. Now, what is the obedience of God? The obedience of God can be found in the life of Jesus. That he willingly come. And not only he willingly come, he obeyed that he should be here. But not only that, he willingly go into the Jordan River to be baptized by John the Baptist. That kind of obedience. And after that, he willingly and obediently, he went to